I took levofloxacin for 10 days, once a day, and ciprofloxacin for 5 days. On the last day of ciprofloxacin, my Achilles tendon started hurting. And I remember I read that in the package insert, and I said, oh, okay, this minor inconvenience will pass because from the studies I read, everything that happens when you take a treatment will disappear when you stop taking it. I wasn't worried about that. What happens with fluoroquinolones is you don't get a side effect immediately. It can happen years, like 10 years even after. I felt fine while I took them. My body completely changed overnight. I don't recognize my body anymore. I spent almost 1 year in bed every day. I think I had dozens of symptoms at the same time. My digestive system completely shut off. I was on a liquid diet for a few months. I had problems hearing, problems seeing. I was extremely dizzy, pain everywhere. Every part of my body was hurting, even my organs. I couldn't walk anymore because I was in a wheelchair for 1 year. I had neurological symptoms. I couldn't swallow. I just woke up with a new symptom manifesting every day. Everything that was me before them doesn't apply. I was simply not human anymore. I lost my job. I lost my friends. I lost my life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to RX Pilled, a channel that is dedicated to discussing the very real dangers that revolve around the pharmaceutical approach of medicine. In these sections, we interview those who have been harmed by these chemicals or their loved ones and have found the courage to come up here and share the truth with us. So please heed their warnings and what they have to say because they speak truth. And joining me right now is Katherine. Hey, Katherine, thank you so much for coming here.
Hi, Ido. Thank you. I'm glad I had this occasion.
Me too. Every time someone contacts and says that they're willing to come up here we're so grateful for that. So thank you for finding the courage to speak.
Yeah, I'm grateful too.
So Katherine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am 28 years old. I live in Eastern Europe. in a country in Eastern Europe before I got flux, because this is my main problem. I had some issues in 2017. I had food poisoning, or I'm not sure if it was food poisoning. Even the doctors don't know. It was either food poisoning or a stomach virus that I may have caught from Belgium. It was pretty bad. I don't want to be very graphic, but I had some violent vomiting. And these digestive issues didn't go away after this episode, and I had these digestive issues for a long time. I kept going to the doctor, trusting doctors. This is how I was introduced to this world of doctors, because I was expecting their treatments to help me, and they didn't. I took a test, and they found that I have H. pylori. It's a very common bacteria of the stomach. When I got diagnosed, I was very careful with medicine. I just started being preoccupied with my health, and I was avoiding, especially antibiotics. I was avoiding them like the plague. I even avoided antidepressants, even though I struggled with some depression in my life, and I avoided medicine. And I tried to do it naturally, but after a few months where the pain was unbearable, and then I developed a really bad gastritis that was like bleeding, I said, yeah, okay, this natural herbal stuff isn't working against this powerful bacteria. And I took antibiotics, the first treatment for H. pylori. But what doctors don't know is that some of these H. pylori strains are resistant. So the first treatment didn't work, so I was put on levofloxacin.
So let me just pause you here. You know, there's several treatment protocols for H. pylori, and none of them involve a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. Usually there is a combination of 3 compounds or 4, depending on the situation of the patient. But fluoroquinolones are never indicated for that.
Yeah, it's actually a novel treatment. It's called salvation treatment. So when the treatment with what was prescribed to me, clarithromycin and amoxicillin, didn't help, I took metronidazole, flagyl doxycycline, and they didn't work either. So this was the last treatment with levofloxacin and amoxicillin. That's how I got to, and I had the prescription. This is what I always do. I usually don't take what is prescribed immediately. I try to research it, and I researched everything, including levofloxacin. But what was the problem is that, being in Europe, our Google searches don't show websites from the US. Whatever I looked on these fluoroquinolones, even reviews, I looked on drugs.com, for example, nothing indicated something bad related to these fluoroquinolones. And what was I going to discover, actually, when it was too late, is that I took them right before the European Medicine Agency started to review these drugs in Europe, because in the US, black box warnings for them were from 2008. So when I researched this drug, I only read studies about it, being useful in H. pylori and being very efficient because it's only once a day, blah, blah, blah. And I was really confident, and I took it.
You were much more judicious than me before, because even, in my medical studies, we heard that some treatments against certain bacteria can cause intense side effects. Specifically, what we were focusing on were the anti-tuberculotic drugs that are, intense. But we never really, except for anaphylactic reactions and perhaps phototoxicity or photosensitivity or things like that, we never really talked about anything severely debilitating that can happen. And I actually questioned other drugs more than I did antibiotics, because for me, I had this perception antibiotics are relatively safe. I knew that, yeah, they disrupt your gut microbiome. And if you take too many courses of antibiotics, you may kind of screw up the balance of microbes that are going in your gut. But this is an issue that can be resolved with proper nutrition and dieting. From what we studied about fluoroquinolones, we never read about all these terrible things that the people that are floxed describe. You used the information that you had available to you. You thought you were making an informed decision.
Yeah, and this was actually the most saddening part, because I could have stumbled upon warnings, and because I've been in Europe, and Europe was very late in introducing these warnings, only in 2019. Only in 2020 can you hope to find it in the patient insert, even though in 2019 the warning was issued and sent to doctors. It was only typed in the packaging in 2020. So it has been updated. I even saw that maybe in someone showed me his ciprofloxacin packaging, and it still wasn't there. So
you used reputable scientific sources to get your information from. And yeah, the same, what I'm realizing is this is kind of a repeating pattern also with me. With my drug injury, when I looked at the studies, right, of the medication that I was prescribed, I was concerned about certain rumors that I heard, right? For example, the drug I took causing digestive tract damage and issues like inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome. And I've read these huge studies, right, that they take samples of like 50,000 people, and they're disproving, any connection, even reaching a conclusion that it provides a protective benefit. And the irony is, right, the doctors tell you, don't go into these obscure forums on the internet, because this is where the misinformation is. You can't trust patients' anecdotes. Don't listen to that. But the reality is, the absurdity is that these are the places where you get the real deal, right? The real info, what is really happening on the ground to people. And your drug that you took, these fluoroquinolones, they've been on the market from the 80s. So why does it take decades for these findings to come up, right? It's unacceptable. It's insane.
Yes, I've done some more research, of course, after I got floxed, because I really wanted to know why are these drugs still on the market and being prescribed with no warning whatsoever. Of course, now they have a warning, but not in Europe. It's not as severe as in the US to make you think twice or even more than you would think about taking the drug. Actually, I found out that they knew about it from the beginning. From the 80s, when the first fluoroquinolone, ciprofloxacin, and the norfloxacin were introduced on the market. I found some articles from Europe, actually, that reporting and these articles were written by pharmacists and doctors, and they were reporting that the suicide rate after consuming ciprofloxacin or ofloxacin were worrying, but they didn't investigate the other effects that these drugs have. The manufacturers had a chance to review these findings, and they didn't do anything. Being a new drug, when a new drug is introduced on the market, you as a patient, you don't directly relate your symptoms to the drug, because what happens with fluoroquinolones is you don't get a side effect immediately, because I felt fine while I took them. I felt fine, and I said, oh, wow, I'm tolerant.
You're touching a really important point here that kind of contradicts a big paradigm in pharmacology, especially the pharmacology that medical students are exposed to, which is the delayed toxicity. So there's this conception that side effects, right, that happen from medication appear while you're on it. And once you stop the medication, the side effects ease up and you return to normal. The only part I can remember from my education that we talked about side effects, or I would not call them side effects, I would call them just tissue damage that is becoming manifest after exposure is with strong chemotherapeutic cytotoxic agents and also radiation. So
Exactly.
yeah, so let me ask you, were you aware also that the fluoroquinolone class of antibiotics were also, cytotoxic, that they are also chemotherapeutic in their, no?
No, I wasn't. I only found out after I got fluxed. So I was quite shocked about this. A doctor that I went to in ozone therapy said that a lot of drugs on the market are chemotherapy drugs.
Disguised as some masquerading is something else. And I
Yeah.
know for me also, when I was hurt, when I was on the drug, I had no issues until after 5 weeks, I started developing intense cognitive issues. And I immediately related it to the drug. Of course, my doctor denied it and said that it's not the drug and I should keep taking it. I stopped it. And only a month and a half after I stopped the drug, when I was expecting, he told me, whatever, if you have something, stop the drug, 2-3 weeks, everything will come back to normal. And then a month and a half after I stopped, my entire body just collapses in a matter of days. And, you come back to these doctors, doctor after doctor, and they just don't understand this simple fact that the damage is manifesting itself after exposure. And the reason I would say there's several, my opinion is there's several reasons for why that is happening. But let's say that the damage that is caused by these drugs happens at the genetic or epigenetic level. You initially have the necessary proteins for your cells to function. So after exposure, you seemingly function normal. But after turnover happens and you need to produce new proteinaceous structures that allows the cells to support their functions, okay, the genetic material is not properly translated into appropriate proteins, you start noticing that. And that's when your tissue functionality starts declining. And
Yeah.
I don't understand why these people are not managing to understand that simple fact.
Exactly, and it's the main issue that is core to fluoroquinolone toxicity is that there's a foundation for research in fluoroquinolone toxicity, and what they found through their studies is that fluoroquinolones damaged mitochondrial DNA in less than 4 minutes after ingesting.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and what I've read, it depends on some people I know, some fluxies, we are called fluxies, they found out through blood tests that they still have fluoroquinolones attached to their DNA 6 years later after consumption. I thought about testing it myself, but I haven't yet made that decision. But I won't be surprised.
For those tuning in and listening to this right now, mitochondria are basically little organelles that are found in each cell in your body, and they are the powerhouse of the cell. So what they do is they basically produce ATP, which is the energy currency that your cells utilize in order to function. So every cellular function needs this energy to work. And when you damage the powerhouse of the cells just stop functioning properly. And then you have all these bizarre and horrific side effects that are just popping up. And so people need to understand this. When you're consuming these drugs, you are literally putting every cell in your body at insane risk. I don't think people fathom this, right? I think people don't, the delayed people that are not really familiar with this, I don't think they really realize, right, how dangerous the decision is to take these drugs.
Yeah, I know, and not even me before I researched it, because I had the time to research it since I became disabled by them. I spent almost 1 year in bed every day. I had a lot of time to research and see what these drugs do to our body, because I was simply not human anymore because of them.
You said I was simply not human afterwards. It's something, again, it's like a term that people use all the time after these injuries, because, so much is taken away from you. You just don't feel anymore like a normal human being. A term that people that are damaged by these drugs, they call people that have not been injured. They call them normies or normal people. And it's like
Yeah.
the gap between where you are now and a normal average individual is just so large.
It is. I mean, the gap is even bigger with myself. My body completely changed overnight. I don't recognize my body anymore. Everything that was me before them doesn't apply anymore. What these drugs do is latch on your DNA, and we had some floxies that sadly have gotten cancer many years after taking them. We didn't do studies to see if it was directly linked, but everyone knows, a lot of doctors know that cancer is caused by DNA mutations.
The last interview that we did with someone who was floxed, Anna, she was right now in the process of trying to diagnose a neurological condition that she's developing, and she pointed out to the fact that a lot of people that are floxed also later developed ALS, and there is a connection there that many people believe that their ALS diagnosis came as a direct result of exposure to these compounds.
Yes, it's terrible. What these floxies that manage to have their DNA analyzed, depending on where the fluoroquinolone attached to their DNA, they were warned that they would have a specific problem with a certain area of their body or something. It's really something very complex and not for everyone. But yes, these drugs are extremely damaging. A lot of people don't link it to these drugs. It can happen years, like 10 years even after someone said he got diabetes. 10 years after he took fluoroquinolones, and there was no history of diabetes in their family or blood sugar problems.
There are also no long-term studies also that properly are conducted to follow up these patients. And I always tell people, when they ask me, like, these issues developed after the exposure, and how can you link it to that? And I'm telling them, well, look, guys, there are very common examples out there of people getting exposed to toxic chemicals that the damage, the full, manifestation of the damage can happen even decades after. So, I bring cigarettes as an example that, they cause mutations in your DNA and eventually down the line lead to cancer. Even though, you were a smoker and you quit smoking, but 20 years down the line, you can still develop small cell carcinoma in your lungs. And,
Yes.
it is a direct result. And people think, no, but it's medication. So why would it happen? But this is exactly how. Katherine, could you please take us back then to that moment where you were prescribed? How was the conversation like with your doctor? What were the warnings that you received?
Being in Eastern Europe, I went to 2 doctors. I was prescribed fluoroquinolones many times, and I went to a doctor in the public sector and one in the private sector. And here in Eastern Europe, the public sector isn't very famous for being in the service of the patient because it has lack of funding and lots of patients, and doctors usually don't explain anything to you. They just prescribe you something, and that's why I did my research. And the same thing happened in the private sector. So I was prescribed levofloxacin and ciprofloxacin. Levofloxacin was prescribed for H. pylori, and ciprofloxacin was prescribed for a supposed inflammation in my pelvic area, which is ciprofloxacin is prescribed for UTIs and pelvic inflammatory disease. And I didn't have any infection, and I think the H. pylori went away, but I don't know yet if it was H. pylori actually that was bothering me, because I still had the same symptoms after all these treatments.
When you're talking about the pelvic issues, I remember when I had prostatitis in 2015, I went to a urologist and he just gave me a prescription of Cipro. And he just smiled, told me, just take this 10 days, 2 times a day, I think it was 500 milligrams. And now, looking back, I remember after that, a week, I went and I would work out a lot. And I went to the park to do calisthenics and just do some pull-ups. And then I remember doing the pull-up, and then I literally ruptured a part of my latissimus dorsi, the lat muscle of behind. I had like fibers of muscle that were, just ripped up. And I didn't even consider it to be the result of the exposure. I just thought, whoa, maybe I overdid it. Maybe I don't know. But that was really, really bizarre. So, okay. So how many times did you take in general fluoroquinolones?
Well, I took levofloxacin for 10 days, once a day, and ciprofloxacin for 5 days. On the last day of ciprofloxacin, my Achilles tendon started hurting. And I remember I read that in the package insert, and they said that if you feel any pain, you should stop the prescription. And it was just in the last day. I didn't even have to stop the prescription. It started in the last day. And I said, oh, okay, it will pass. This minor inconvenience will pass because, as you said, from the studies I read, everything that happens when you take a treatment will disappear when you stop taking it. I wasn't worried about that. What I found right now, I had certain signs that could have been a contraindication for fluoroquinolones because I have flat feet, and it's not really sure why people have flat feet. It's something related to tendons and muscles. So even though it is not known why you have flat feet, there's definitely a problem there with your connective tissue. I didn't find this on the packaging insert because if I would have found, like you have for diabetes, if you have diabetes, you have to take care of your blood sugar if you take fluoroquinolone. And something like this wasn't written in the package insert, so I wasn't concerned. But what I believe is, me personally, as opposed to other floxies who were completely healthy, I think I had an underlying genetic predisposition for a connective tissue disorder. But when I took fluoroquinolones, this got worse.
You were already compromised in some sense. You had an Achilles heel, or a weak spot to that. Everybody who got injured by a medication, in the history of people getting injured by medications, I don't think anybody was told this drug can annihilate you. And then they were like, okay, sign me up, I want it, right? So everybody was, their worries were kind of dissuaded and they felt safe with taking it. So what happened after you finished the course and you had that tendon problem? You thought it was going to go away. What happened from there?
I started having pains during the night, and when I woke up in my Achilles tendon, it was intermittent. One day I had that pain, but I saw that I didn't have that pain when I was walking and going about my day, so I didn't worry about it. And then the pain became worse and worse. Then in April 2019, my whole body started hurting and all my tendons. It got very bad. As you said, I ripped a muscle as well, trying to get out of bed.
You had a difficulty even getting out of bed. And that was in April.
Yes.
In April 2019?
Yes.
How many months after you finished the course?
2 months after.
Okay.
So 2 months after I finished ciprofloxacin. It was really bad at the beginning because these symptoms started progressing to the point where I could only lay flat in bed.
Wow.
And I couldn't even hold my phone. It was painful to hold my phone. It was painful to hold a spoon or to lift my water glass. It was terrible. And I felt like I was tortured. I felt like someone was beating me. And it only got worse. And I managed to join some group and discover what happened to me right before it got really worse, but I couldn't reach for help in time just because I wasn't able to hold my phone. I had days when I was staring at the ceiling. I couldn't even watch TV because that meant I had to use some of my muscles and some of my tendons, and the pain was whole body. I think I had dozens of symptoms at the same time. My digestive system completely shut off. I had problems hearing, problems seeing. I was extremely dizzy, pain everywhere. I had a concussion a few years ago. I felt that pain like I felt it then. A wound healed a few years back, and I felt that pain in that wound. I had neurological symptoms. I couldn't swallow. Luckily, I could swallow water, and I was on a liquid diet for a few months.
Wow, sounds
Yeah.
terrible. And
Yeah.
describe visual issues. How so? What were they like?
With my vision, I had floaters, so spots in my vision. I had stripes in my vision. I had foggy vision. It wasn't logical. So I just woke up with a new symptom manifesting every day at the beginning.
How was your cognition? Did you feel any effects on your ability to think, to verbalize, to express yourself?
Oh, yes. Right now, you caught me on a good day. I still have moments when I can barely talk and I can barely find my words. I speak really slowly. I have short memory issues, but when this happened, I was really aware that this was floxing. There's no doubt. I felt that something toxic was happening in my body. I was able to communicate what was happening, but it was very hard to do that. I was out of breath as well. Some of the doctors I reported these symptoms to, they said that I'm depressed.
Yeah, we'll get into that soon about your journey to try to understand what is happening to you and how the medical system, how effective it was in doing so. But I just, again, want to stress that point of these symptoms. So because people that got damaged by these drugs, when they listen to you say these things, they immediately understand because they're going through the same things. But people that never got injured by a drug, it may be very difficult for them to understand what it's like. So I know it's hard and not comfortable to delve into that from my experience as well. But could you try to explain to someone who never experienced this, what is it like to feel this body pain? What is it like exactly? If you can give us some even metaphors of what it's like to have this going on in you.
I had the feeling like I got hit by a bus or a train or a truck or whatever you like, because the physical pain was unbearable. And it was, for me, it was body wide. My muscles hurt, my tendons hurt, every part of my body was hurting, even my organs. I can only describe it as being beaten. This is how it felt.
So from a scale to 1 to 10, how bad would you describe the average levels of pain that you were in?
I think it was 10.
10 out of 10. 10 out of
Yes.
10.
Yes, because it was debilitating.
It was debilitating.
Yes, I couldn't do anything. I was in bed all day.
Wow. It doesn't matter how exactly the mechanism of action is for these different compounds, the damage itself, how it happens, but the end point is the damage occurs. And so what I see is with all these different compounds, whether it's fluoroquinolones, whether it's puberty blocker, whether it's Accutane or isotretinoin or sometimes finasteride, the symptoms are overlapping. It's like people suffer from the same syndrome. So for example, these floaters, the foggy vision, the cognitive impairment, the short-term memory issues, the working memory issues, the hearing issues, everybody suffers from the same symptoms, it's like this syndrome of whole body-wide toxicity. It's unreal, right? You can't imagine that something like this is even a possibility. That something that is approved by the FDA, for example, if they approve a drug, they say it's safe, they say people should take it, then it's safe, right? But I'm sorry, but if this is a consequence of consuming this drug, if this is a possibility, then that is not safe, because it's not something you can control. Because, for example, vehicles, cars, everybody knows that when you get into a car, cars aren't 100% safe, right? Things can happen to you. But a lot of it is under your control. But nobody's going to tell you that driving a car is 100% safe. When you consume these compounds, you have no control. There's nothing you can do. They're already in your body and they're doing what they're doing. You cannot control it whatsoever. It's beyond you anymore. And so this absurd notion of telling patients that these drugs have been proven to be safe is ludicrous.
Exactly. And what the European Medicine Agency, it's the equivalent in Europe of the FDA, they admitted that all fluoroquinolones are genotoxic. So it's like they damage DNA, because fluoroquinolones that are on the market today weren't pulled out because a lot of fluoroquinolones from the past were withdrawn from the market because of the exact side effects that the fluoroquinolones prescribed today are causing. They were rejected because they were too damaging to the liver or to DNA or to kidneys, but it's not excluded that the ones that are still on the market aren't as harmful as those. So this is what surprising.
If you were facing a life-threatening situation, for example, like anthrax, you would say that it's reasonable to consume something so toxic, perhaps, and take a chance if it is proven that it can save your life. And that is a rationale I can agree with and I can understand. And I always say drugs are tools. Drugs are tools. That's what they are. They're tools, and they should be used specifically and only for their indication. The problem that is happening here is the financial incentive that the industry has to push these drugs to make as much profit as they can. And then what happens in the end result is that these drugs are being prescribed to other indications, and that's why people get hurt.
They are prescribed like candy everywhere in the world, when a lot of doctors know that they are the last resort. It's not written in the package insert anymore. I personally would not take these drugs, even if I was maybe, of course, if it was exactly the last resort, like what last resort should meaning you are on your deathbed.
Yeah, exactly.
But even then I have doubts that I would take them, because when you are so badly affected by a disease, if you take fluoroquinolones, it can make that disease even worse. And it's precisely what's happening right now with coronavirus patients, because even though coronavirus is a virus, doctors prescribe fluoroquinolones to these patients, even though they don't have proven bacterial infections. Even a study published in China admitted that they don't know the cause of death of that patient that they were studying, because he died from liver failure, and they couldn't establish if he died from the drugs that he was given, because he was given fluoroquinolones with prednisone, which is a steroid, and fluoroquinolones are never prescribed with steroids.
Yeah, it's a contraindication.
Yes, I would never take this drug if I knew how destructive it is.
I think people don't understand that this damage, and we'll get to that soon, when you are affected by this sort of destructive damage all over your body, I mean, at least for me, there were a lot of times that I just wanted to die. And so if I was now told that the drug that I took that did this to me can save my life, I think I'd rather be dead than get even more damaged by it like it did to me prior. And it's so insane. I would never take that drug. What did you do? You know, when this started happening, did you consult with other doctors? I mean, how did your journey to find out the truth begin? Like, what happened?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I went to the emergency service here at a hospital. They admitted that yes, Cipro does this. So I showed him that my Achilles was hurting. It wasn't worse. It wasn't that bad when I went to the hospital. Debilitating pain only followed a week after I went to the hospital, because this is what was written in the package insert. If you have pain, call your doctor. So I went to an orthopedist, and he said, "Oh yeah, that ciprofloxacin can cause tendon ruptures or tendonitis even up to 6 months after you stop treatment."
Wow.
And that for me was the first time I heard about long-lasting adverse effects from a drug, because I never knew that. And it was a doctor told me this. Usually doctors tell you that no, it's not from Cipro, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And this doctor was an orthopedist and he knew about it. But then he denied it some weeks later, because it couldn't be the body-wide pain, couldn't be Cipro. Only the tendon pain can be from Cipro. It's a big mess here.
So you go initially, they acknowledge that some of what you're having could be from the Cipro, but then again, when you try to, pursue again more honest inquiry, you hit a wall of denialism.
Yes, precisely. And when they saw me that I couldn't walk anymore because I was in a wheelchair, for 1 year I was in a wheelchair.
Wow.
So I couldn't walk. I had pain in my tendons and muscles even when I was in bed, even without moving. Just being alive meant that drug was destroying me every day. It doesn't leave the body, and it was demonstrated by fellow floxies that studied this. It doesn't leave the body.
If I remember correctly, in April, you started having this massive pain and damage everywhere. How long after April did you find yourself confined to a wheelchair?
In May.
In May. So 1 month
Yeah.
after that, you're already finding yourself confined to a wheelchair, unable to ambulate yourself.
Yeah, because in May, someone donated his wheelchair to me. I couldn't walk from April. I only could do a few steps. A few steps being confined to a wheelchair, yeah, that's a big step. Those few steps went worse.
Wow. And so, okay, after that interaction with that orthopedic, what happened afterwards? I mean, he told you it's not from this drug. It can't be, that it causes all these body-wide issues. What did you pursue further afterwards?
Well, further, at the same time, I was supposed to start a new job. So that went down the drain. So I lost my job. I had to go on sick leave. For sick leave, I had to go to a hospital. This is how it is in Eastern Europe. I went to a hospital, and the orthopedist, the same orthopedist that saw me and said that this is from Cipro, he said that this is no longer from Cipro and that I should go and see a rheumatologist. I saw a rheumatologist in the hospital. They denied that Cipro did this to me. They didn't make the complete test for my symptoms. So the blood work came back fine. And then they ended up telling me I should go to a psychiatric consultation.
Wow.
So that's when I decided to go privately. And while I was privately investigating my markers, my blood markers, they found extremely high inflammation. This is how I managed to be on disability because I was disabled by these drugs, and they caused massive inflammation in my body everywhere from head to toe. I'm lucky now that I can even talk to you because, like I told you, I was in bed for a year. I couldn't even sit on a chair. It was painful to sit on a chair because fluoroquinolones affect your connective tissue. The whole body is made from connective tissue. So if that is inflamed all the time and even destroyed because fluoroquinolones affect collagen multiplication, so you have either defective collagen or you lose collagen. It was quite a journey, and I went through some dark moments then and there. I could see the real face, the pharmaceutical industry and doctors and even other people that were beside me, and who I lost my job, I lost my friends. Yeah, I lost my life.
Couple of questions for this. First of all, I commend you for having the strength to continuously pursue for the truth and trying to understand what happened to you while having to undergo all these issues. Because when it happened to me, I was just so destroyed, so horrifically this brooding despair that I just kind of gave up for a while. I just couldn't even I barely could even, force myself to go to the toilet. And so, when you get to this point, a lot of people that get hurt like this, obviously they get extremely depressed. And that is, one short stop away from having, to go to a mental health consultation and seeing a psychiatrist. And a lot of people that get hurt by these drugs get gaslit in this manner, telling them, obviously you're very depressed. Who knows, maybe your depression is causing a lot of these symptoms to pop up. And a lot of people find themselves then victims of the psychiatric establishment, and they're forced to take a lot of psychiatric drugs. I know that happened to me because also, you talked about your friends kind of distancing themselves. For me, also, my family didn't believe me at all because, when we went to the doctors, they told them it's not the drug. How was your experience with that? Did you pursue mental health consultations? Were you, pushed to take these drugs? And was your family supportive, understanding? Were your friends understanding? Guide us through that. What was it like?
Yeah, a lot of doctors said, since I got sick in 2017, I've been repeatedly gaslit, and doctors labeled me depression. So my real symptoms, so my digestive issues, were attributed to depression, which wasn't the case. When I got floxed, they just issued the warning in Europe that these drugs can cause debilitating, irreversible adverse effects and symptoms, and they listed everything. Because when I first took fluoroquinolones and studied them, it was before the European Medicine Agency started investigating them, and it was a whole process of flocks people from the whole of Europe to be able to make the European Medicine Agency issue this warning. So I had this warning. It was printed. It was sent to doctors, to all doctors. So they should have either, I don't know if they opened their email or something. The European Medicine Agency, they issued a warning in April. And it was exactly when I got severely floxed.
Yeah.
So I had that printed and showed it to the doctors, and they still didn't believe it. My parents at first didn't believe what was happening, but when I showed them this warning, they didn't question it anymore. Yes, some doctors still didn't believe it, and they wanted to put me on antipsychotics. And because I got floxed, I didn't want to take any synthetic medication ever again. I only took paracetamol for the pain I was in daily, but very rarely because it can damage your liver as well. I was in a way lucky that we had this warning issued in Europe, because if I didn't have this warning, my family wouldn't believe me, and even some of the doctors, because one doctor, my rheumatologist, had a patient that had this from Avelox, from moxifloxacin, which is the most powerful fluoroquinolone on the market. So it's known, but a lot of doctors still denied it, even though they received it. I don't understand how you can deny the science as a doctor. They said a lot of people took Cipro and they'd have nothing, which isn't true, because since I got sick, people started finding out about what happened to me, and then they started asking themselves, oh, wow, I wonder if this pain is from that as well. And they had similar symptoms as I had, but it affects everyone differently. I was just unlucky that maybe I had some genetic predisposition and was affected worse than others till I became disabled in a wheelchair.
So a lot of injured people out there that don't even know that they got injured. That's
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Tell me, what goes on through your mind when you're experiencing all of these debilitating symptoms, mental health wise? What was your mental state?
At first, I was extremely scared because I went through the whole process. I mean, I knew what was happening to me before because I had the tendon pain during the last day of Cipro. I was just getting worse and worse every day, and it was depressing. And I was scared when I couldn't walk, when I couldn't even type on my phone or hold my phone. What happened to me is that I was also numb. You know, I didn't have emotions. It's called depersonalization.
Yeah.
You're disconnected from your feelings, and frankly I think I couldn't be really affected with depression because the pain, my brain was too busy thinking about what was happening to me to even be depressed. That came after.
So when you managed to kind of already comprehend what is going on and the depression kind of settled in, did you have suicidal thoughts? Were you in great despair?
Oh yes, I had death wishes more than suicidal thoughts. I wish I was dead. I remember hearing about a girl dying from an infection or something, and I asked myself, why couldn't I just, why? Because some flaxseeds are killed by this drug. There are instances where just from one pill they die. And I asked myself, why couldn't I just, instead of being in pain and experiencing this terror, I wished I was dead, because I was like a vegetable. I was in bed all day. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't breathe right. I couldn't hear right. I couldn't see right. I couldn't eat right. I couldn't digest my food. Even the process of eating was very difficult. I mean, I remember I had worse pain when I was eating. These fluoroquinolones turned my body against myself.
What I want people to understand is, what people don't get is they think that, oh, it's like a reaction. While you're on the drug, something happens in your brain and you become suicidal. What people don't get is that a lot of people kill themselves after this happens because they just cannot cope with losing their bodily functions, with losing their career prospects, with losing their relationship with friends, with losing themselves, and they fall into this despair. There's no solutions that are being offered from the medical establishment at all to treat this. And people just don't know what to do. And so many people just end up, committing suicide because of this. And that is the reason. And also, with Accutane, this drug, it always says, it increases the risk for suicides. There have been suicides with this drug while you're on it, but we monitor you. What they don't tell you is that the reason people kill themselves is because of this horrific syndrome that develops afterwards. And it's just unbelievable. You're in support groups on Facebook, right? There's a lot of support groups for people that are injured because this is the only outlet that people can find other people that can relate to them. In my group, Life After Accutane, just recently, another member just passed away by suicide after a struggle of 4 years with the side effects. So, yeah, it's extremely challenging.
Yes,
Wow.
it is. We have types of suicides for flaxseeds, because what fluoroquinolones also do, they are really toxic when it comes to your brain. And some of our flaxseeds just get suicidal thoughts out of nowhere. So some of them reported they had no history of depression and they just started thinking about killing themselves. This is one type, but the other is, like you said, and what happened, you can't take it anymore and you just wanted to finish one way or another.
So how did you cope with this during these years, and how are you doing today, now in 2020, in April 2020? How are you doing today?
Right now, I just started walking bit by bit. I'm taking natural supplements to help me with inflammation. This is what saved me mostly. So the right supplements, because I lost so much money buying everything that could have possibly helped me, and a lot of stuff made me worse, because it depends on everybody, but I was in the severely flux category. People that are severely affected, some things don't work, like in other flaxseeds, for example. Flaxseeds are supposed to take Q10 or ubiquinol, and
Yep.
In severely flaxed people, this is toxic, which was the case for me. So it was trial and error until I found something that could make my life a little bit tolerable. I still deal with debilitating symptoms today.
So still dealing with debilitating symptoms to this day, but there has been some sort of improvement.
Yes.
Wow, it's just unreal. It's just from an antibiotic. Are you hopeful right now for the future? Do you hold hopes of continuously improving? And are you right now still on disability and unable to work?
Yes, I'm still on disability and I'm not working. I still hold a hope for the future. We have a website called flaxyhope.org where people tell their stories. Right now, I have become really involved in faith, because when you go through something like this, sometimes it opens your eyes to more superior and spiritual realizations, and I've become religious, and I really think it was something that a lot of flaxseeds managed to hold on to, because you can't go through something like this without a spiritual support. And I still hold the hope that I will get better, of course, but it's no justification for keeping these drugs and for misinformation being spread by doctors and the pharmaceutical industry just because I can recover. Because even though some people maybe lose, I don't know, a few months from their lives, me, in 1 month, I lost my job. I was also a student, and I lost my scholarship. So my career is fractured all in 1 month. It doesn't matter.
What was your perception of the medical establishment before this happened? And what is your perception now? What are your thoughts now about modern medicine?
Well, before I got sick, I trusted the medical establishment because I didn't have serious issues. So every time something was prescribed to me, I got better. I had the luck of stumbling upon good doctors. But when I got sick, at first, I realized that doctors cannot be your friend all the time, and very few. Maybe it's because my encounters in the past with the doctor was when I was little. When you're a child, doctors probably treat you differently. When you're an adult, I think it changes, and the doctors change. Right now, I don't have a very good impression of the medical industry anymore. I mean, I appreciate the job they are doing right now, especially with this pandemic, but I think they aren't aware of many risks at present. They aren't aware of the damage they are causing. And I even saw a documentary that said some people are taught in med school that 50% of the cases they are seeing is because of either medication or medical errors. And 50% is a lot.
Yeah, one of the leading causes of death and disability right now, I think in the States it's number 3, is iatrogenesis, is getting harmed by either taking medications as prescribed or undergoing some sort of medical procedure. So there you go. There you have it, folks. Medicine is one of the leading causes of death and disability. What would be your message to doctors and physicians watching this right now? What would you want them to get out of this interview?
My message would be to please focus on the patient and understand that the patient knows his body more than you do, and don't deny what he's feeling just because you've read in a medical book, or just because you were taught that by your mentors or by the pharmaceutical industry. And if your goal is to make people better, your mission as a doctor is to make people better and to improve their health. And you only do that by focusing on the patient instead of trying to put him in some patterns that you have in your mind. And to be open. This is my request, to be open, because I mean, when the literature is full of all types of discoveries, they discover new things, research. I expect a doctor to be open-minded, to be a scientist, and science is about being being enlightened by a certain way of thinking, and not by only focusing on some doctrines. Some doctors told me, I don't believe in this test. I had a test, a stool test done in Germany, and it's done everywhere, this stool test. But in Eastern Europe, some doctors say, I don't believe in this test. I would try to say that medicine is not about beliefs. It's the last thing that is about beliefs. Medicine is about science and biology and chemistry, and I mean, it's not an exact science like maths, I agree, but it doesn't mean that you can write off an equation just because you don't believe in it.
Yeah, to add to that, I just say that a lot of times medicine just, works almost as a religious cult. It's, what we are taught in med school is like the word of God, even without a lot of substantiated science behind it. What we're taught, that's it. That's a doctrine, that's a dogma. We can't question that. And it's preposterous. It's almost like, you bring up, and when you tell me, how can these doctors not realize what these drugs are doing? It's because it provides them with a head-on contradiction, right, to what they believe in. And it's not supposed to be about belief. It's supposed to be about the truth. And people speak the truth. And doctors should take the time to listen to what patients have to say about their experiences with these drugs, because this is real world, events, experiences that people go through, not something that is written, not some arbitrary experience written in a textbook. And a lot of times also the science is not really science at all, but it's filled with conflicts of interests, a lot of things that are omitted, and the education that doctors are receiving is far from the truth. Another question to you: what would you say? What would be your message to any potential patient that is finding themselves in a situation where they are in a consultation with their doctor about being prescribed the medication? What would be your message to these people?
It would be to research everything, not just, read the patient insert. Maybe try to understand more profoundly what that drug is about. I wish I didn't have to say that, because it's not our jobs as patients to do research. And because for me, I didn't even know what a tendon was before I got floxed. And it wasn't my job to know that it will affect my tendons. That doctors should know that. And because of this current situation, you have to research everything and to take control of your own life. And you are the only one that can protect your health in your life. Don't trust doctors or the pharmaceutical industry.
So it's like expecting, when you buy a car, you're not expected to be a vehicle mechanic, an automobile mechanic, and understand how it works. When you're boarding a plane, flying somewhere, you're not expected to know how to fly the plane. You're supposed to trust a professional. And unfortunately, with medicine, we simply can't trust the professionals. We simply can't trust them because the professionals themselves are not being professional at all, many times. My final question to you is, what would you say to people that have been hurt by these medications and are going through this, they're staying silent? What would you say to them?
I would say that the people that did this to them, sooner or later, they will get what they deserve. They should be aware that it's not their fault. This is what happens when you are left alone in a situation like this. It's actually a form of abuse, because you have been harmed by someone. Sometimes as a victim, you start to blame yourself, and you shouldn't blame yourself because it wasn't your fault. This disorder is not your fault. You have to know that you're not alone. There are people that you don't have to think that there are people that have it worse. Don't panic. Try to stay positive. And even though it's hard to stay positive, you always have to be convinced that it will pass eventually, and you have to be patient with yourself. If you're recently floxed, you should take magnesium and calcium and try to detox as much as you can.
Do you think people that got hurt should come up here and speak up?
Yes, I do, because if we are making this more public, then people would know what to look out for, and we are educating people around us, maybe even doctors or other professionals in this area. I think information is power. Seeing, just like people say, oh, this product is so nice and it changed my life, there should also be people like us in the media talking about how these products destroyed our lives.
Yeah, and that's why, anybody who's watching this right now who has been harmed, I encourage you to come up here. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. When I did my first interview after what happened to me, it was not an easy thing. It was not comfortable to expose myself openly and talk about this. But I urge you to find the courage to come up here and speak up and not suffer in silence, because we need the truth to be known. We need it out there so that, first of all, this will be acknowledged, so that we have a body of testimonies that can be shoved right down the gullet of the establishment denying that this is happening, and that we will not remain silent, because we have nothing to be ashamed of. We were the ones who were harmed. We were the ones who were betrayed by those who took an oath to do no harm and did eventually cause a lot of harm. So please take your power back. Come up here and join us in this effort to spread awareness and truth to what is happening worldwide with the medical establishment. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much for coming up here and finding the courage to speak your truth, to share with us what you had to undergo. Thank you so much, and I wish nothing but the best for you. And I really, really sincerely hope that you will recover as much as you possibly can.
I wish you the same thing, and thank you too. Thank you for doing this project. It's amazing. Thank you.